Welcome to the Love Lab Podcast, the place to be for honest and real talk about relationships and sex. Whether you're a man or woman, single or a couple, this is the show for you. I am your host, Kevin Anthony, and I am here to help you have the relationship of your dreams and the best sex of your life. All right, welcome back to the Love Lab Podcast. This is episode 355, and it is titled, What She Secretly Wishes You Knew About Intimacy. So this is, I think, going to be a fascinating conversation, and we're going to cover today is the things that women really want or need when it comes to intimacy that maybe aren't quite so obvious, maybe aren't quite spoken to directly by most women, but yet are critically important for them to really have deep intimacy. And I know, obviously listeners to this show know that I do pre-interview calls with my guests. And so when we talked about this topic and we kind of threw out some of the ideas, I know from my own experience coaching that these are definitely things that not all men understand. So we're kind of giving you at least part of the female playbook here as to what it is they really want and what it is they really need. So I think this is going to be really, really valuable. And I would say also, if you're a woman listening, because I do have a fair number of women who listen to this show also, I would say it's worth tuning in also, because you may never have thought about some of these things, because I work with a lot of women now these days too. And when we talk about some of these things, I will often hear things like, oh yeah, I never really thought about it that way. But that is actually underneath the thing I said I wanted, is that need down here, right? So this might bring a little bit more clarity into why you want what you want, or maybe help you see what you want or need in a slightly different way. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we do that, a short word from my sponsor, Power and Mastery. Power and Mastery 3.0 is the latest version of the popular men's sexual mastery course. If you're struggling with erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, or simply want to increase your skills in the bedroom, then Power and Mastery is for you. Join the exclusive club of men who have taken their sexual performance into their own hands and become sexual masters. Mastering your sexuality is a key component to becoming the man she has always dreamt of and craves. Don't leave your sexual performance up to chance or the throw of the dice. Become a sexual master today by going to powerandmastery.com and joining the exclusive club of men who have taken their destiny into their own hands. It's powerandmastery.com. And by the way, in that course or series of courses, not only are you learning how to master your sexuality, but some of the things that we are talking about today, or at least that we're going to talk about today, are also in there because they are key skills in the bedroom and outside the bedroom. So go check that out, powerandmastery.com. Okay, my guest today is Zerina Derveni, and she is a highly respected life coach dedicated to empowering women to unlock their fullest potential. Through her transformative self-discovery programs and bespoke coaching, she guides clients on a powerful journey from performance to purpose, helping them create lives rooted in confidence, clarity, and deep meaning. Welcome to the show, Zerina.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we're just going to dive right in. We are going to probe your brain for as much female information as we can possibly get today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is years of experience of being a woman, talking to women, and now coaching women on a professional level. So I'm excited to dive in.
All right. First, I want to start with a little bit about your background, because we talked a bit in the pre-interview call about how you worked for a long time primarily with men, and now you are coaching women. So you're working with a lot of women, which means you spent a lot of time sort of immersed in both sides of that dynamic. I'm wondering if you can tell listeners a little bit about that background and sort of how that's brought you to the understandings that you're going to be sharing with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent over a decade working in corporate, in executive roles, and a lot of my mentors, a lot of my colleagues were men. And I learned a lot about, communicating with men, how men thought, just overall how, men behaved and working so closely with them, although even at a professional capacity, helped me really understand how to even improve that relationship in the workplace with men. A lot of my experiences were very good. I enjoyed very much so working with men. I actually even learned a lot of my leadership skills working with men, communicating clearly working with men, prioritizing priorities versus task working with men. So there was a lot of back and forth dialogue during my time in corporate with men. And I think, during our maybe off work conversations, also listening to some of their challenges, whether it would be just personally or in relationships. So being around that also helped me kind of understand, from a man's perspective, what were some of those challenges that they were facing, whether it be from a communication perspective or whether behavioral perspective. So got a lot of insight, I think, being around men for quite a bit. And it even helped me learn how to communicate with men in my personal relationships better. So yeah, and then, a few years ago, I decided to pursue the passion of coaching. I was very much so into coaching for a very long time. I think also as a mentor to many women around me, and helping women understand a perspective that was outside just, their subjective opinion, and bringing into perspective a man's way of thinking, I think helped me also be able to solution or provide recommendations to women that were just easily absorbed. I think that's the best way to explain it. Was a component of logic, a component of emotion that for women, they would be like, oh, I get it, like, okay, maybe, he is not understanding me, or maybe I'm not communicating clearly, or maybe I'm a little bit all over the place. And it's just really, again, having that insight into how men communicate or how they want to be communicated for better results. And then having that insight into women, how they can better communicate to men. So I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah, definitely had a lot of experience with both sides. But my decision to work with women only really came from a place of wanting to help them again through their self-discovery journey, and be a better version of themselves.
When you were working with all those men, did you ever, run into maybe challenging situations and you were like, I need to sort of crack this code. I need to figure out how to either communicate with him better or get him to understand me or anything like that? Were you kind of playing around with those things back in those days?
I definitely would trial things to see what would be more effective or what would resonate better. So let's just say when it came to wanting to present a new idea, for example, I never kind of went in and said, "Oh, this is what we should do," and what do you think about this? It was always in a collaborative way where I wanted to be able to provide some sort of context, yet, lean towards him to see what feedback he had as well. So it was more of a collaborative effort versus me maybe wanting to go in and have this mindset where my idea was great and that's all, and we should go for it. So I would trial ways of presenting ideas or ways of presenting strategies. A lot of what I did was around consulting and strategies. So that was one way. I think another interesting one too was also helping, them build their confidence too in leadership, right? So there was this component of me sometimes only being the only woman in some of these teams where I would, kind of use my emotional intelligence and see like what can I do to help, my colleague just perform better in meetings, or is it preparation? Is it, having some discussions beforehand? Is it helping, you know, boost his ego or boost his confidence. Those were all really important. Just working in a team where I knew just as a woman, I had more of that emotional intelligence or more of that nurturing side to me that was effective in the business.
Hmm. So essentially, you were kind of like a man whisperer, right? You were like basically figuring out, how to communicate effectively with them, and how to potentially, uh, when you're talking about working in a team of men and you're the only woman, and it's like anybody who's really realistic understands that when you bring both the masculine and the feminine together, you get a synergy, right? Because there are strengths and weaknesses that we each have, and so it's a really effective skill to do when you've got two emotionally mature, people that come together. You can really have a lot of synergy. So you coming into that all masculine team and being aware of some of those dynamics and saying, how can I, as the one woman on this team, you know, sort of fill the gaps that they have and therefore transform the whole of the group, I think is an amazing skill, actually. And I imagine that you probably learned quite a few things about the way men operate from having had that experience.
Absolutely, yeah. And keep in mind, Kevin, a lot of the stuff, at least from the men's side, it's done at a subconscious level, right? So at that time I had the awareness to tap more into my conscious level, but there was this level of respect that I was definitely, it was really important for me to be able to communicate with respect, to be able to support with respect. That was reciprocated. So I found very early on, if I, go in with this mindset of full respect and performance wise try my best, whether it's preparation, whatever it is, it was oftentimes reciprocated. So there was this synergy, the feminine and the masculine that worked really well. Our results most often, were great because of that, because of the different dynamic and the different value we each brought.
Yeah. So that's not really the focus of what we're talking on today, but I think it's really interesting, right? Because you had this experience working with so many men and learning how to speak to them, work with them, how to sort of create those successful dynamics. Then you turn to coaching, right? Where you're coaching women primarily. And now you have an opportunity to share with them all those things that you learn. But while doing that, I imagine you are also hearing quite a lot from the ladies about what they need as well, right? So that's interesting how you ended up sort of being an expert on, I mean, obviously you're a woman, so you have your personal life experience, but from becoming an expert in what it is women are really looking for, you got there because of all this experience you had as a woman working with a bunch of men. So it's an interesting way that you came around to that, but I think also a very valuable way. So let's talk now about the other end, which is what is it that women really need? We talked about a few things in the pre-interview, so I kind of want to make sure that we hit a few of them. So the title of this episode is What She Secretly Wishes You Knew About Intimacy. So let's talk about a few of those things. And let's start with the impact of her feeling unseen. So this is one of the things you shared to me that was a really big thing for women is that they often will feel unseen. Talk about that impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, we often hear, compliment your woman, give her attention, tell her she looks nice, but feeling seen is so different from just giving a compliment or, just physically seeing her or being, present with her. What I often find, and this has been through so many coaching sessions, even with my clients, is when they feel unseen, this tends to have them shut down in intimacy. So, what does unseen mean? So, it just basically means not acknowledging her efforts, not acknowledging her presence or her strengths. And when I mean from an acknowledgement perspective, I mean from a objective perspective, right? So we'll use efforts, for example. So let's say your woman just finished organizing the kitchen, right? And most often, our instinct, or for men at least, is to go in and say, "Oh, wow, this is great, good job," right? It's to give that compliment. But really, what she's yearning for is for her efforts to be noticed. So it's, wow, you put in a lot of work today. I could tell you put in a lot of care. Your effort is definitely being seen. So it's coming from a place, again, very objective, focusing on facts, not making it about you, not putting any pressure to give a compliment, because as women, as you can imagine, we are people pleasing, right? We are people pleasers. We are caregivers. So the moment we get a compliment, we want to do it again. And there's this subconscious sense of pressure when we get compliments versus acknowledgement, right? And
This should
yeah.
be easy for men, you would think, right? Because we're so good with facts, but yet men struggle with this thing. One of the things that I see men doing a lot is these really like generalized, non-specific, like you said, oh, good job, right?
Hmm.
Okay, but what does that really mean? Did you notice the 10 different little things that, I did in order to create that good job, right? So, if we use the example of she made a nice meal and it's like, oh, that was a great meal. Okay, but what if you said something like, wow, I really appreciated the detail, like the way you added this spice or this thing that really brought out the whatever. Like, you know, it's one thing to say great job. It's another thing to share the details, because the details mean that you actually noticed how much effort went into it. Good job could mean you spent 5 minutes on it, or it could mean you spent an hour on it, but you don't know which one it is unless you actually share a few details that acknowledge the amount of effort it took to do whatever the thing is. So I would think that for men it should be easy because we're so good at the facts, and yet at the same time, uh, one, we tend to not verbalize them. Right. So we think a lot more of those types of compliments in our head than we actually speak. That's one thing I'm always helping men with, is like when it pops into your head, verbalize it, let it come out of
Mhm.
your mouth rather than just thinking about it, and to try to be more specific with the compliments that you do share. Uh, but even though it should be easy, it's often not. And this is where resentment builds up, right? Because she's putting in so much effort to do whatever it is. I mean, I just used a meal, but it could be anything. Maybe she's the one that handles the finances in the relationship, right?
Right.
And you just take it for granted, like, hey, thanks for making sure that's taken care of. But maybe saying, hey, I realize that it takes hours of time to go through all the receipts and to make sure it's all tracked and to make sure the account is balanced and we have enough money for all the things that we need. So whatever the thing is, sharing those specific details, I think, is really important.
Exactly, yeah. And you actually said something that I was going to mention. It's when she feels unseen, she feels taken for granted, right? So that resentment, you're absolutely right. It will start to build up, right? The more and more you don't see her, or you don't acknowledge her effort or her presence or her strength. And that's what, then that's when a woman shuts down, right? In intimacy. So she's not getting that acknowledgement. She's not getting that feeling of being seen. Whatever it is, whatever she's contributing in however way. So, but it's interesting. You're right. It is facts, and yet, that's a category that men are so good at, and maybe just subconsciously we don't think to do it because we're just so used to it, right? We're used to her doing this, and we're used to her maybe not vocalizing her effort. But that's where really it takes that leadership skill for the man to kind of stand up and say, "Wow, you really." Put in a lot of effort today, or I saw this and I noticed this, and this is all, again, objective, right? This is
Yeah.
her doing.
And if any of the men listening are thinking like, I don't really get why you're making such a big deal out of it, I'll offer a few examples that maybe will make it easier for the men to really understand. Because as men, we feel like a lot of the times we are doing a lot of things around the house to contribute. Yet often our woman will criticize and complain about all the things that we don't do. And therefore we feel, taken for granted and not seen. Now we wouldn't phrase it from the point of view of I feel unseen, because that's not terminology that generally we would use. We would say something like, she doesn't appreciate, all the things I do for this family or for this house or for her or something like that. Like that's typical terminology that you would hear from the man side. But I offer that as an example to illustrate that it's very similar. Like if you can understand how it feels on your side, then you can understand how it feels on her side as well. Same thing with work, right? Because there were some things there that were similar to work. You're in the workforce as a man competing in this male dominated workspace, and what would you prefer? Would you prefer when your boss like walks by in the hallway, pats you on the back and says good job? Okay, well, that's better than a lot of workplaces I've been in, but wouldn't it be even better if maybe in the meeting with the other bosses, he says, I want to give some credit to, Kevin for doing X, Y, and Z. Yeah, it's a whole lot better than just saying great job and walking past you in the hallway, right? So those are ideas to sort of help illustrate to men, if you're having difficulty understanding why this is so important to women, realize it's important to you too. It just shows up a little bit differently.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, there's a similarity there. So when women feel unseen, it's very similar to when men feel criticized, right? They want to be admired, they want to be appreciated. And really, it's kind of the same thing. Like we want to be seen. We want to be, again, valued. We want your presence to be acknowledged with our efforts. So yeah, there is a similarity to there where a woman, when she feels unseen, it's similar to when a man feels criticized.
Yeah. And I
You
think
know,
it's important to point out those similarities because too often we focus on, men are this way and women are this way and we're just so different. We're never going to meet in the middle. Yeah, we are different. That's perfectly fine. Those differences, as we kind of talked about earlier, when we bring them together, create synergy. But
Mhm.
also we need to understand that we're not as different as we sometimes think we are. We have very similar needs as humans. They just tend to show up a little differently.
Exactly. I would agree.
So let's talk about something else uh, that's important for women. So important for women in intimacy, but also in other areas of life. And that is the need to feel understood. Can you talk a little bit about, what does that mean? How does that show up for women? How can men potentially do better at understanding women?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where men show up with presence versus pressure. So when a woman wants to be understood, we want to be listened to, right? I think oftentimes when we're explaining a challenge or a scenario where we're just emotionally overwhelmed, the first instinct for the man is to get in there and fix it, right? Provide a solution for her, which is very admirable. I just want to say, any man that's doing that, there is a sense of us deep down that we do admire that desire, that leadership of wanting to fix our problems. But where the issue lies is there's a sense of pressure, right? There is not a presence that we're yearning for. There is this pressure of like, okay, let's fix it, let's do it. Where really what we want to do is we want to be listened to. I work with women, Kevin, and we need to sometimes go through the same scenario 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Okay. It just is what it is. And we don't necessarily want to fix it right away. We're still kind of gathering our thoughts and we're thinking about, other possible scenarios in our head before we actually want a solution. So, this is a really important area where, as a man, if your woman comes and she's complaining about a specific challenge, or let's just say she had a disagreement with a friend, you want to basically be there with your presence and listen. And when we're listening, we're not listening to respond, we're actively listening. And when you have a moment after she finishes expressing her challenge or pain point, that's where you can step in and you can ask her, do you want me to listen or do you want me to help you come up with a solution? So
This is
that's
this is
the,
so huge what you just shared. I I'm hesitating because in my mind it's like I can't even believe that there are still men alive in existence that don't understand that a woman doesn't always need you to fix things. And yet that is true for a lot of men, so much so that we need to reinforce that point here on the show, which is that sometimes she just needs to vent it. She just needs to move that energy. She just needs to speak it. She doesn't really need anything else. Like you said, if she just has somebody, preferably, somebody that she trusts that can hold a container, to just hold that space and let her move through those 7 or 8 different things, then all is well. And one of the biggest mistakes men make is going straight into fix it mode. It is what we do. Like, we fix things, we build things, we create things. That's what the masculine does. But it's not always appropriate when dealing with your woman to go straight into fix it mode. And I loved what you shared, which is that idea of let her, speak what she needs to speak and then offer her, would you like me to help you solve this, or do you just want me to listen? Because if you're unsure, that's all you got to do. It's that simple. Just simply ask her, what does she need? You made another important point too that I would love for you to talk a little bit more about, which is this idea of active listening. I've talked about it on the show a few times. I've had some communication experts on, but it's always a good one to go over again. What does it mean to actively listen in comparison to what a lot of people do, which is listening to respond?
So actively listening to me is just basically being present, absolutely present. You're not gathering details so you can form a response in your head. What you're doing is you're focusing on the words that are coming out of that person's mouth, and you're actually showing empathy, right? So you're taking in those words. You're trying to understand from that person's perspective what they are saying and not making it about you at all.
Yeah. And that's hard for a lot of people to do because, it's one thing if it's something that's, simple or easy, but when emotions come up, right? Well, especially if there's some sort of disagreement in the couple, there's a tendency to really only hear the words that you need to hear in order to form a response that somehow makes you right. Right.
Mhm.
So it's more of a defensive kind of a strategy. Like, I'm not really listening to understand what you're saying. I'm just listening to figure out what my defense is, right? Where are the holes in what you're saying so I can get in there and exploit them, right? Which is not at all what you should be doing. You should be genuinely trying to understand where the person is coming from. What is it that they're trying to convey? What is the need, the underlying need beneath what it is they're trying to convey, which is an even deeper level of active listening. There's one thing like, okay, I want to understand the words that you're saying.
Right.
But as is often true with all people, and maybe even a little bit more so with women, is there's an underlying need beneath those words that you're also actively listening to try to understand what is the underlying need here. And I think that's a place where men struggle a lot, is really listening in that way. And that's why it's just so important to understand.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can start with small steps, right? With actively listening. As simple as, just repeating what that person said, right? Repeating that sentence. I think that's a good way to train the brain not to go right away into reaction mode or listening to respond. It helps you kind of stay in the moment, stay in the present, and actually listen to the words that are coming out by practicing this repetition of, if I heard you correctly, this is what you said, right? So I find that's a really good tool that's practical and can help you deepen that active listening skill.
Yeah, that's a really big one. This idea of repeating back, and I paused and hesitated a little bit again because you have to, this is the type of thing that you should be talking about beforehand when there isn't an issue going on, right? It's like, hey, let's talk about how we communicate. Let's establish a few ground rules, right? Because what you don't want to happen is, she says something and then, you repeat it back and she's like, I know what I said, right? Sort of thing. So there has to be an understanding there that the reason why I'm repeating this back is because I want to make sure that I actually understood you, right? But as long as you have that sort of ground rule laid in your relationship, like, hey, in order to make sure that we're in a clear understanding and agreement, I might use some strategies like repeating back what you said or asking you to repeat back what I said, right? It's not because I think you're stupid or you're not capable of understanding it. It's just to make sure that we have clarity and we're in agreement. there are so many times, and I'm sure you see this in your work too, when you work with people, where two people are having an argument about something because they don't even realize they're actually saying the exact same thing. It's just they've
Mhm.
used different languaging and they haven't taken the time to fully understand the point the other one was making. So they don't realize they're talking about the same thing. So they're arguing, and you're just sitting there going, but you're both saying the same thing. Right?
Exactly. Right, right. Just in different ways,
In
right?
different ways, exactly. So that's the idea of that seeking to understand, is you can avoid that because once you actually understand them, you'll know, oh, we're actually in agreement, we're actually saying the same thing, we're just talking about it from a different way.
Yeah.
Is there something in men, like, because we talked about in the first one that feeling unseen was similar to feeling criticized in a man. When it comes to not feeling understood, is there something in men that's similar that they could relate to help them understand this?
Yeah, I would think it's similar to, when a man withdraws. So let's just say, the woman is not being as open because she doesn't want to communicate because she thinks that her man's not going to understand, or she's not being her usual self, where, the dynamic of the relationship is a bit more playful. So the moment she kind of shuts down, that's, because she's not being understood, that's kind of similar to when a man withdraws, where he feels like, there's not much of a open gateway there for him to try anything else. He kind of feels defeated. So he'll
Mhm.
withdraw and close down.
Yeah. So for the men listening, when you get to that place where you feel like she's just not hearing you and therefore it's not even worth continuing anymore, and then you just shut down, that's a similar feeling to when she's feeling not understood by you. I think it's, like I said earlier, I think it's good to sort of make those comparisons because I think sometimes you just go, oh, she feels like that when that happens. Okay, now I understand better.
Hmm.
Um, so we've got a couple more to talk about, but we're about halfway through the show. So I want to take a break uh, for an ad. And then when we come back, I want to talk about feeling emotionally unsafe. And I also want to come back to the presence piece because you mentioned it, but I know this from personal experience. We need to dive deeper into what presence really means and how to become a master of presence. That is so important. So we will do that on the other side of this break. Men, are you tired of falling short both in the bedroom and in your relationship? Do you want your woman to respect you and also crave your cock? Do you want to be the man she secretly brags about to all of her friends? What if you could become this man? What if you could not only master your masculine sexuality, but also be the dream man who shows up for his woman in all the ways she desires? What if you could become so irresistible that she becomes addicted to you? If you are ready to become that man, then go to kevinanthonycoaching.com/men. That is kevinanthonycoaching.com/men. So a lot of these skills that we're talking about that you should possess as a man in order to have that kind of relationship that you've been dreaming about your whole life are the types of things that I work one-on-one with men on. So if you're listening to this today and you're just like, how the F do I do that? This sounds like a lot of work. I don't understand what you guys are even talking about. If that's you, please go to kevinanthonycoaching.com/men. Sign up for a strategy call. I will help you figure all this out. Trust me, it's important. Okay, let's get back to what she secretly wishes you knew about intimacy. And I mentioned before that short break about the need to feel, or I should say, the feeling of being emotionally unsafe. This is another one I would really love for you to talk about because I did a whole episode on this show about what safety means as far as women are concerned, and I did that because I was noticing that for men, when they hear she feels unsafe, the very first thing they default to is physical safety.
Right.
And so
Right.
you'll hear things from men like, well, she knows I would never hit her. She knows I would never do that. And I'm like, whoa, okay, yes, maybe. But safety goes so much deeper than just that. And that's what I would love for you to talk about from a woman's perspective. What does safety mean? What does it mean to feel emotionally unsafe? And then, of course, how men can help create more emotional safety.
Yeah. This one is a very important one, and I think this is the foundation of intimacy, really, is for a woman to feel emotionally safe. And this is what can really deepen intimacy. So what does this mean? This is probably the number one conversation I have with women when it comes to challenges in their relationships. And oftentimes they find themselves performing, right? In a way, emotionally, this is all happening in a emotional level, performing in a way that's maybe more acceptable to their partner, where they fear maybe judgment, or they fear that if they are a bit more emotionally vulnerable and open with just things that are actually, happening in their mind, that their partner will kind of like judge them, or shut them down because they don't understand that level of depth, right? So there's been numerous of conversations that I've had with clients where they're expressing to me that, oh, like we're not there emotionally, so I don't feel comfortable speaking about this. And I, as the coach, am always encouraging that no, that's the person you should be speaking to about it, right? Because that's how you get to that vulnerable state in your relationship, and reminding women that yes, it's not going to be a success the first time. Yes, maybe the communication will not resonate with the men the right way, but you just got to keep, kind of pursuing that. So when a woman feels emotionally safe, you'll notice she's much more open, she's much more playful, she'll be able to just be herself more without this fear of judgment or shame that I think a lot of women just feel, whether it's culturally or socially. It can really depend on the individual woman, but having that emotional openness where a man is calm, for example, right? He's not reacting to things, he's calm. That right away helps our nervous system shut down in a way that we can be relaxed. We can be more ourselves. So that's one. Another one is when a man is steady. So powerful. And what I mean by steady is reliable, consistent. This is a very, very powerful characteristic trait where I see women just feel much more relaxed, and then they can be much more emotionally vulnerable and open, and feel comfortable, expressing emotions to their man because they have the capacity to receive it. They're not fearing that he's going to judge or shut down. And this isn't happening in such a harsh way when I say judge, but there are components of just, the men maybe not understanding. So feeling emotionally safe is a skill not only on the woman to be able to communicate her emotional needs, and that's where I really work with my clients to feel comfortable and to be clear about the communication, but there is also that expectation that her partner will, be open to listening, and make her feel just much more safe and relaxed about it.
Yeah, this is one of those things that sort of creates a self-perpetuating cycle in a sense that when a woman doesn't feel emotionally safe because he's not creating a container of emotional safety, she's not vulnerable, right? She's not opening herself up. She's not sharing vulnerably at a deep, intimate level. And when she's not doing that, we as men feel that, right? And therefore, we basically don't share at a deeper emotional level either, which is already a challenge for most men. But then it just sort of reinforces that.
Hmm.
Then the less we share openly and emotionally, and intimately with her, the less safe she feels, the more she shuts down. And you see, like it just keeps spinning around and around and keeping you locked in this place of never getting to that level of depth and intimacy that both of you technically are really craving. So it's something to be careful of. So, you're working primarily with women. And one of the things that I see with women is he's not creating that, right? So she's like, well, I'm not going to open up and be vulnerable.
Right.
Or another thing that I often see is in past relationships, she's been with men who weren't safe. And so she learned to kind of shut down and hold that in. Now she's
Mhm.
in a new relationship with a man who technically is safe and creating emotional safety, but she's still not letting him in, right? And the longer she stays there, the more he feels that there's like a wall there that you just can't seem to crack or break through or climb over or whatever, right? And those things really negatively affect the relationship. So, granted, both men and women have to do their work on their end. The reason I bring that up is for the ladies listening. I know it can be hard and I know it can be really vulnerable to feel safe enough to open up, but you opening up is just as important a piece in creating this level of intimacy that you both crave as it is for him to create safety. So he can create all the safety in the world, but if you're not allowing yourself to really open up and be vulnerable, which is like one of the, you know, sort of master skills of the feminine is to allow yourself to be vulnerable and receptive, then you're still never going to achieve that level of intimacy that you're really craving.
Exactly. Yeah. And I often find a lot of the women that are struggling with this are deeply in love with their partners, right? So it's not a sense of not having that love or desire. It's a sense of not being able to communicate because somehow they feel emotionally unsafe or they don't maybe comprehend that their partners will be able to reciprocate the same feelings or leave that open space for those feelings. So it is one of those things where I highly recommend to start small, right? I think when you start in small steps as early as you can in your relationship to make that a little bit more of a norm, I would highly recommend that where, some couples have kind of bottled it up for so long and it just becomes a bit more challenging really to bring up all those feelings. But I do get great feedback from women when men are just, again, more calm in their presence. They're more reliable. They're holding that emotional space. Like that's good enough for them to just get more comfortable to be more emotionally open. And then I also encourage women to lead the emotional side of a relationship with men, right? I think just as nurturers, we should be leading more. And we're the first to, call our friend who's down and help her emotionally. We're the first to take care of our community. We're the first to take care of our parents. Why wouldn't we also do that in our relationship, which is the most important relationship? So giving the women the tools and the confidence to really lead that, I think really helps the dynamic of the man and women normalize some of those conversations and space.
I completely agree, and I'm so glad that you said that. I do feel that, it is, we have roles in relationships. They're not hardened roles that can't ever change, right? And there can be overlap and they can switch from time to time. But in general, I do feel that it is really good role for the woman to really lead the emotional side of the relationship. Because honestly, as men, we're just really not that good at it, right? Um, and I think, when the woman does lead that emotional role, it can really help sort of open that up for us as men, especially if she's also doing it in a very emotionally mature way and not an out of balance kind of way. Um,
Right.
I also just wanted to talk a little bit more because I think this is really important. You mentioned a couple of specific ways, and I just sort of want to reiterate them and then ask you if there are any other things. But when we're talking about creating emotional safety in a relationship from a man's point of view, a couple of things you mentioned, ways that he could do that. One is to be calm, right? To not overreact to things. I was actually having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day because he has a little bit of a tumultuous relationship with his partner, and he's very reactive to things, right? Which, of course, then triggers her. And I've been telling him for well over a year now, you've got to calm yourself down. You've got to be the rock. You cannot be overreacting when, she has some, uh, change in emotions or hormones or whatever, and it's so hard for him to do. You see, as soon as she starts to sort of go, into the crazy ways that sometimes women can be, it triggers him and he loses it. So I just think it's super important for guys to understand that you can't do that. I'm not telling you you can't have emotions. I'm not telling you you have to excuse bad behavior or tolerate something that's not healthy. That is not what I'm saying at all. All I'm saying is you have to be sort of like cool under pressure, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I don't know, to just make up an analogy, it would be something like, let's say you're a police officer and, gunshots start firing out. Like, how do you react in that situation? Do you freak out and panic, right? Or do you keep a calm head and go, okay, there's a situation here that needs to be dealt with. What's the best way to do it, right? And I think that's what we have to understand as men, because, you know, women will have fluctuations. They'll have ups and downs. They're hormonal creatures. Things are changing and shifting all the time, and that's okay. That's This is why, we talk about synergy, right? And it's like
Right.
this is literally your job as a man, is to be the freaking rock to calm things down, right? And I just see so many
Absolutely.
men
Yeah.
struggle with it. But I think maybe if they understood that by doing that, that actually creates a feeling of safety that allows her to simmer down, right? And I think that's
Right.
a part they're missing. They think I just got to sit here and take it and like it's abuse or something. It's like, no, no, no. You need to be that right. You need to be the one sort of, let me stop the boat from rocking so much. Because as soon as she
Mhm.
feels that, she will instantly calm down.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, understanding just the way our mind works, like we are a chaotic nervous system, right? Even some of us who are the most stable or look like we're the most emotionally stable, we still have a nervous system that gets triggered right away the moment we fear danger, right? Now, I'm not saying, you reacting is danger, but there is this subconscious alert system that goes on. And then we know how to kind of like protect ourselves or pull away or shift the topic. So a man staying calm is so powerful because it allows for our nervous system to just calm down, and then we can use our words much more rationally versus our emotions, right? So I think if a man can really practice staying calm for the benefit of the relationship, again, it will be a muscle for those that are not maybe as familiar with that state of mind. But really, if you practice it more and more, you'll notice that, your woman is opening up more and she's feeling much more emotionally safe. And, staying calm and steady, as I mentioned earlier, can also mean, holding her, right? Like looking at her in the eyes. That's so powerful. And at first, maybe the first few times it can be a little bit intimidating if that's not a normal dynamic in your relationship. But again, starting with small steps, having her know that, hey, I'm here. I'm here to reassure you. We're in this together. I got you no matter what. I think that reassurance, that emotion coming from absolutely no judgment will really help her calm her nervous system and will really help her feel emotionally safe.
Yeah, that's I mean, those are master skills as a man, right? So be calm, be steady, uh, hold her, look her straight in the eyes, all of those things that help calm her nervous system down. We have a few minutes left in the show. Let's at least spend a few minutes talking a bit more about being present. This is a term that I use a lot. I read an ad at the beginning of this show for the Power Mastery course series. There's a whole module in the sexual mastery course about what does it mean to actually be present as a man. I find that this is a really important thing to talk about. And I also find that a lot of men don't truly understand what that means. I'm wondering if you could talk about, from a woman's perspective, what does it mean for her man to be truly present and how can he do a better job at it?
Mhm. So I think, starting with the physical aspect, right? Being present, it's facing her, right? Looking at her. It's having that body language that's welcoming. That's again, you're focusing on her when you're speaking to her. you're showing up, you're not distracted, your focus is her. So when you're there, your focus is her and you're making her feel seen, kind of going back to the first thing we talked about. But to me, I think it starts with just again the physical body first, and then it goes into the dialogue, the communication style. Are you listening? Are you paying attention to what she's saying? Are you being focused? Right. So it would then go into that more of that communication dialogue once the presence or the physical aspect of it is there. So that's to me what being present is. It's really being in a state of the actual present at the moment and not focusing on the future
What
or
what happens to a woman if she feels her man isn't present?
I mean, there's frustration, right? She'll shut down, maybe. Maybe she just won't feel as important or significant to whatever it is that they're talking about. We definitely pay attention to that sense of presence or lack of presence. Now, whether we vocalize it or not, that's a different scenario, but we definitely know when our man is actually paying attention to us versus when he's just being there. And, I think the idea here, it's not to be present 100% of the time. I mean, life doesn't work that way, but definitely to get more in the habit of just when you're going to be there, be there. I think also it's a powerful tool that men can use. It's like, look, I may not be around, all day, but when I show up, my presence is there. And it just really helps us, value that more. And if not, respect our partner more when he is showing up in his full presence self.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I feel like in today's world, this is kind of a lost art because, with all our technology and social media and, 20-second sound bites of everything, our ability to focus and really have an attention span has been severely compromised. And so you take a scenario where the average person, both man or woman, is already struggling to really focus attention on any one thing at any time, right? And now you bring that into the relationship, right? Where, men have also traditionally struggled with focus. You have a recipe for disaster, right? And it's interesting that what you said too is that, uh, when he is not giving his full presence to her, she notices it. This is so, so true. Uh, this is part of what I share in that module in the courses that I read the ad for that I just mentioned, which is, there's no better example of how this plays out than during sex, because during sex, there are many times where he might appear or think he's present because you're having sex, like it doesn't get much closer or more intimate than that, but yet mentally he's checked out and he's not really giving his full presence to it. And so I always tell men, I'm like, the second you start fantasizing about some other woman or porn or even, trying to, count something or, go over baseball stats because you're trying to keep yourself from ejaculating, that takes your presence out of the situation. And you might be there right in front of her, face to face, connected via the genitals, and yet she still feels that you're not present and checked out. And I think sometimes that men are like, how could that possibly be like in that scenario? And it's like
Right.
because there's a quality there that's more than just the physical.
The enthusiasm, right? When you're present, there is a sense of enthusiasm that you can't fake. It's just there. And I think it could happen either through dialogue, through intimacy, right? Through intercourse. There is a sense of enthusiasm when you are present that's shown, that's genuine. So yeah.
Yeah, and you can't fake it. You really can't fake it. Your presence is either there or it's not. And women are like, if there was such a thing as a presence detector, we have lie detectors. If there was such a thing as a presence detector, women would be human presence detectors.
Oh
Like,
yeah. Yeah.
like she
We
just
pick it up.
immediately, like immediately,
So
So
true.
guys, there ain't no faking it. You got to learn how to do this, right? You got to learn how to give her your attention when it's appropriate. So, and as you pointed out, doesn't mean you have to give it to her all the time. Like life doesn't really work that way, but
Right.
when it's appropriate, you got to do it.
Right.
Okay. I don't know that we have enough time to talk about this, but I really wanted to ask you about it. So I'm going to try anyway. We'll see if we can squeeze it in. Uh, which is this idea of the three-dimensional relationship. Could you maybe just spend a couple of minutes talking about what is a three-dimensional relationship?
Yeah, so a lot of what we talked about today really it's to deepen intimacy and it's to get your relationship on another level, right? I think a lot of us often work with the two-dimensional relationship framework where it's like I do this and you do this, kind of like the gender norms, or you get comfortable with, okay, well, I provide the emotional safety, she does the nurturing, I do this. So the three-dimensional, it's getting you out of that loop where it's like, no, my woman's needs are my needs. And then from a woman's perspective, it's my man's needs are my needs, right? So it's again taking that relationship to another level that can only deepen intimacy and strengthen the bond, but it's looking at from a perspective of your partner's needs are actually your needs versus, this kind of give and take or this systematic role that we can easily get into in our relationship just because it's easier, it works better. So yeah, that's where the concept of three-dimensional relationship comes in. It's really taking it on another level and thinking different and putting your partner's needs first and vice versa to get to this other level.
Yeah, and everything that we talked about so far is how you get there. Like, so, that wasn't a random question out of nowhere. It was like when we're talking about, all of these things that women need, these are essential components to building that three-dimensional relationship that you just defined. I also want to point out to listeners that I think it was well, by the last week when we're recording this, it'll be a few weeks apart, when this actually airs. But I had another guest on recently who was saying, "Is your relationship transactional or reciprocal?" That's the way that she phrased it. And I think
Hmm.
that it's basically the same thing that you're describing here, because transactional is that I do this, then you do that, and then I do this, and then you do that, versus this idea of reciprocity in there, right? Which is my needs are your needs are my needs. We're working together all the time to try to have the best relationship we can have and to try to help each other be the best versions of ourselves that we can be.
Yeah, no, I would agree. It's very similar to that transactional and analogy. So yeah, the three-dimensional really it's just taking it on another level and getting into the habit of prioritizing your partner's needs, right? But that has to be reciprocated the other way around too.
Yeah. And, I wanted to just point that out that it was similar just because it's repetition. The more times I have qualified experts on this show telling you the same basic underlying truth, hopefully the more it will sink in. Right. And sometimes I feel like maybe I just need to connect the dots so that people understand that there are some core truths that that weave through every one of these situations. So
Mhm.
hopefully people will get that.
Yeah, and I hope, the examples we went through today, they're practical, right? I think again, it's a muscle and it's being consistent and getting into those small habits, but they are definitely practical tools that anyone can implement and try and reap the benefits, really, right? So
Yeah.
that's the goal.
That is the goal. That's what it's all about. So that is a perfect time to tell the audience where they can find more about you and your work.
Yeah, so you can find me on my website at www.zerinalifecoach.com. I'm also active on Instagram at Zerina Life Coach. But yeah, if you've got any question, there is this contact form on my website, and that's probably the easiest way to contact me. So
And the link for her website is in the description. So just go check it out there. Zerina, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge and wisdom and helping men better understand women and what they need. I don't know if there will ever be a time when this is not necessary, but right now, in the time that we live, it is so critically important to help each other understand the other side that I find that perspective so valuable. So thank you for coming on the show and sharing it.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody, that's all the time I have for this week, and I will see you next week. I hope you liked this episode of the Love Lab podcast. If you enjoy this show, subscribe, leave me a review, and share it with your friends. And for more free exclusive content, join me in the Passion Vault at kevinanthonycoaching.com/vault. That's kevinanthonycoaching.com/vault. Thanks for listening. And remember, as Celine used to say, you're amazing.